My name is Sheila Carino. Welcome to another chapter of A Soul's Journey by Peter Richelieu. For those of you who may be following along with me in either the PDF that is freely available on the internet at Scribed, um, or in the book, I am on chapter 6, and in this particular one, it's page 72. The prospect of being taken on another astral journey by my Indian teacher has made me quite excited, and thinking about what may happen has taken away some of the disappointment I feel in not yet having achieved any results when alone. Last night, I concentrated on seeing myself lying on my bed, as I certainly did the night I was helped. When I woke this morning, I felt well rested. I remembered it had taken me a long time to go to sleep, but of what had happened to me after I lost consciousness, I could recall absolutely nothing. I must find out how this business of bringing things through can be accomplished. I know it is no use worrying about not being able to learn the tricks of the trade at once, for worrying more often hinders than helps. I suppose the only thing I can do is to persevere with this concentration, which I am told is so important a part of the proceedings, until I make some small beginning from which to work. It is useless feeling disappointed. My Indian friend was standing behind me where I was writing. I had not heard him open the door. That is what happens in so many instances. People are shown a glimpse of the truth, and because they cannot at once do the things that they know are possible for others, they get discouraged and give up trying. And that's true, I want to say, because it happened to me myself. I figured, but I now know that it's perseverance, practice, knowing that it can happen. Often people say, obviously, this occult life is not for me, whereas all that is necessary to achieve results is a little patience and the determination to break through the wall which separates our worldly existence from the life we lead when asleep. Do not expect too much, my friend. Remember, it is less than 2 weeks since you sat here, bowed in grief, not even knowing for certain that death was the logical sequence of life. Now, at least you know something, and soon you will be given the opportunity of knowing more. You are thinking, why do not more people know these things? Perhaps they have not asked for knowledge, for help, as you have asked for knowledge. Let's see, wait a minute. I lost my place. I apologize. Perhaps they have not asked for knowledge, for help, as you have asked. Perhaps they are quite satisfied with one of the many orthodox religions, which tell them to have faith and to believe that everything is sent. Everything sent is the will of God. All happenings are certainly the will of God, but it is easier if we realize why such things are. It is easier if there is a logical answer to every question. Also, if it is made possible for each individual who takes the trouble to prove things for himself, thereby making the acceptance of statements made on a basis of faith unnecessary. Faith is always good, but knowledge is better. You must have faith whilst acquiring knowledge, and whatever happens, you must never lose heart. Evolution is a slow process and can seldom be hurried, though the activities of an individual can be inspired by encouragement and by help given at the right moment. So far, you have seen only a tiny sector of the astral world, the sector usually occupied by those who have recently passed from this world through the portal known as death. Once you have established yourself as an inhabitant of the astral world, you seldom visit such places, but you can go if you wish. You do from time to time, for example, when you meet special friends and relations who die and so require some help from the regular inhabitants. In exactly the same way that you require help from friends living in a foreign country, which you are visiting as a tourist or a new settler. The astral world is divided into what are known as spheres, levels, or subplanes. It is necessary to know that each sphere exists, or you will never be able to understand how the machinery of this world operates. Most teachers illustrate their point by asking their students to understand the densest sphere of the astral world as being the conditions which exist whilst standing on the ground. In this sphere, there is a counterpart of everything that exists in the physical world. Where there is a town or a building in the physical world, there also in the astral matter is the counterpart or reflection of that town or building, which you can see quite clearly when you function at the astral level in your astral body. Imagine the astral counterpart of Piccadilly Circus, London, which you visited a few nights ago, as representing the noisy, lowest sphere. Then imagine a similar world, say 1 mile above the lowest world, to which one can transport oneself in a second's time by an effort of will. This corresponds to the second sphere of the astral world, less dense than the first sphere, but still rather materialistic and akin to physical plane conditions. If you were existing 1 mile above London, you might still hear something of the roar of London's traffic and the noise that is always a part of the life of a great city. But that would be only a murmur compared with the noise you hear standing on the ground floor, as it were. Now imagine a third sphere of consciousness, yet another mile above the second sphere. And you can visualize the probability that when you are living in the third sphere of the astral world, you would be so far removed from the noise and bustle of London town that you would not only be unaffected by its existence, but would be more or less unconscious of it. There are 7 spheres of consciousness in the astral world, each less material than the one, quote, below it, and permanent inhabitants can spend their astral lives on any of these spheres according to their natural desires. For example, a man may spend a few weeks on the first sphere, then the next 2 years on the second sphere, later passing to the third or fourth, as his habits and desires become less material and more artistic, intellectual, or spiritual. Thus, there is never any possibility of overcrowding in this world. In this physical world, a man's choice of where he will live is limited on account of his work, through which he earns the money necessary for existing here. He may be forced to live in places which he would not otherwise choose. Many parts are uninhabitable owing to climate or other difficulties. A man cannot exist comfortably at either the North or the South Pole owing to extreme cold and other limitations such as lack of sunshine and daylight at certain times of the year. He cannot live in many of the existing deserts owing to the lack of water. He cannot live in the dense jungles, for Here there are wild beasts which must first be exterminated before it is safe to build a house to live in. In the astral world, he does not encounter these limitations. The climate is the same at the north or south poles as anywhere else on the astral plane. There is nowhere any limitation of daylight, as the light is everywhere, the same for 24 hours of every day. In the desert, he does not need water for his existence. If he wishes to live in the astral counterparts of the jungles, he can. There are no wild beasts to attack him, for just as a man learns he cannot harm an animal in the astral world, so the animals learn they cannot harm man. In addition, there are 7 spheres of consciousness to choose from, so it is always possible to obtain the conditions required to make practice the type of life desired. No, sorry, to make practicable the type of life desired amidst surroundings which are in accordance with man's emotional, mental, and spiritual development. Once you get a grasp of these different types of existence which make up the life which follows this one here, it will be easy for you to see how all parts of the jigsaw puzzle fall perfectly into their places, and the evolutionary path becomes a logical sequence of events controlled by natural laws, sound in theory as well as in practice. All these facts are explained and taught in the schools which exist on some of the astral spheres. And it is usually through these schools which a man hears about any one way or another at the appropriate time. The appropriate time that the urge or desire to pass from one sphere to another is born. In these schools, the astral entity is shown the way in which to transport himself from one level to another, the change being brought about through an effort of will made in a particular way. For although the matter of which an individual sphere is composed is different from the matter of which the other spheres are composed, our astral bodies include matter similar to that of all the spheres, and it is only a question of making active the atoms in our bodies relative to the sphere concerned to enable us to function fully in the sphere chosen. A further point which the astral entity is taught is that a man functioning on the second sphere cannot contact or communicate with one functioning on the first sphere, nor a man on the third with the one on the second. If a man living at the third level wishes for any reason to get in touch with a person living on the first level, he must again descend to the first level by an action of will, which, as I said, makes the sphere atoms in his body become active again. The same process is applied when going up or down. The life expressed at the different spheres is separate and to all intents and purposes self-contained, in exactly the same way that life in England is separate and different from the life in India. Both countries are part of the physical world. All spheres are part of the astral world, but they work separately and for very definite reasons. The most material part of the astral world, the densest part, is the sphere which surrounds you immediately after death. And whilst you live in this dense part of the astral world, you see all the things around you that you saw when you were living in the physical world. Say you lived in London during your lifetime. It is more than probable that after death you would remain in the astral counterpart or reflection of London, merely because, to begin with, you want to remain in touch with something which you understand. You want to see people around you and to have a perfect home where you can entertain friends as before. Then one day, perhaps a friend points out to you that life in town has few advantages in the astral world and suggests that you see the beauties of the countryside. You can easily visualize the difference in atmosphere between an existence among the teeming millions which comprise a metropolis and the comparative peace of a country village, where the inhabitants are counted in dozens instead of thousands or millions. This is the second sphere, which, for want of a better description, I have suggested should be thought of as being 1 mile above the level of the first sphere. And here you would find many families happily carrying on their existence, with social intercourse and the usual things which go with the idea of the perfect country life. You can live in these spheres as long as you like. A very coarse and material type person is happiest in the densest part of the astral world, for that part is nearest to and most like the physical world to which he is so attached. And here he continues to live a very limited existence. These are not spheres in which a developed person, a man who has some spiritual background, would be particularly happy were he forced to remain under these conditions for long. He is not so forced, and after passing through the purgatory period in which he is shown the results of the good and evil actions of his past life, the realization of which influences his future character, he begins to feel an urge to get away from anything which is similar to the life that is over, and the revelation comes to him of the immense possibilities for interesting and profitable experiences which await him in the higher and less dense spheres of the astral world. Eventually, he settles down to live his astral life surrounded by conditions which are in keeping with his actual development. This may be on the third sphere, where he meets the type of individual who is a creator, musicians, artists, scientists, etc., or on the fourth sphere, where he can discuss world problems with men who have greater intellects than himself. When an astral entity of human origin reaches these spheres, he becomes aware that they are also inhabited by other entities which he finds are of non-human origin. It is important that you know something about these entities and their origin before you have further astral experiences, so I shall tell you something about them now. These entities comprise a parallel evolution called the Deva, or angel kingdom. They evolve in a similar way to the human kingdom, in that instead of individualizing from the animal kingdom into the human, these entities, which previously were seen and known as insects, fish, or birds, individualize into elementals, nature spirits, and devas, or angels. When the time comes for a bird or fish to progress to the next stage of its development, it becomes either an elemental or a nature spirit, according to its type in the physical world. You will remember when I took you under the sea on your first astral journey, I showed you some of the elementals that live in the bottom of the ocean. Originally, these were fish, and their natural journey towards their goal of perfection, they have to change from fish to elementals in just the same way that dogs, cats, horses, etc., change from their animal types into the unevolved types of human that we know of in the world. Birds, for example, turn into nature spirits. Fairies, they are sometimes called. And although these elementals and nature spirits, after many progressive lives, reach a stage where they become what the world describes as devas or angels. Now, there is a great difference between the two evolutions in that the Deva evolution does not inhabit the physical world after the fish or bird has progressed to the elemental or nature spirit stage. It only inhabits the astral and mental worlds and apart from the lower elementals and very junior or unevolved types of nature spirits, they do not live below the third sphere of that astral world. That is why so little is known of this evolution by people living in the physical world. And they hardly contact it as far as the ordinary individual is concerned. Though human beings who have developed the dormant sense of clairvoyance can, of course, see these creatures even at the physical level. For there is no closed door to the clairvoyant between the astral and the physical worlds of consciousness. But as I have said, the average man has no such knowledge, and usually he ridicules the stories that are circulated concerning the existence of such entities. It is only in undeveloped countries where the inhabitants are nearer to nature than the average that the quote little people, as fairies and nature spirits are called in Ireland, are recognized. There, although the majority of people have never seen them, the leprechauns, gnomes, and elves are acknowledged to exist. To this day, many farmers refuse to till a particular piece of land which folklore maintains is used by the fairies. Many are the stories that are told, where materialistic modern owners of the land, scoffing at the old stories as rubbish and superstition, have suffered misfortune, which the local inhabitants put down to their having insulted the little people. I do not propose to comment on whether these quote bad luck stories are founded on fact or not, for frankly, it would be impossible to give any general opinion on the subject. Each cause would have to be separately investigated in order to ascertain the truth, and it does not happen to be my present task to make such investigations. I tell you, however, that on the astral plane, these entities not only exist, but they play an important part in the life of the astral world and after death. When you reach the third and higher spheres, you will not only see them for yourself, but will have contact with them, as I shall describe. When a man passes to the fourth sphere, he would at first be impressed by the entire absence of what might be described as activity. He would meet people there, of course, and if he had not already met them in his past physical life, be introduced to them in exactly the same way as people are introduced in the physical world. He would be welcomed as a man of similar interests to themselves by the permanent inhabitants of that sphere, who know that he could not have progressed as far as the fourth sphere unless he had the necessary desire and qualifications to enable him to function there. So I had to pause the recordings because it was my turn to hit the restroom. So back to the book here now. So instead of physical activity, we would find much mental activity. For the main interest of the inhabitants there is discussing international and evolutionary problems, discussions relating to the development of science, discussions relating to the parallel evolution of the Deva kingdom with its great differences from our evolution, and so on, or the formulating of theories which they endeavor to test out. All this may sound very dull to you, but to an intellectual type of individual, it is not dull at all. Of course, the people one meets vary intellectually, and those who have the finest intellects, who are actually the older and more experienced souls, take the lead in the discussions, as is natural for them to do. In many cases, members of the Deva kingdom join the deliberations, though the intercommunication in such instances is not made through the medium of words, for although not yet living in the mental world where everything is governed by thoughts, it is found that in the higher levels of the astral world, conversations can be carried on without the actual use of words. Life is so much less material there that the possibilities of exchange of thoughts come quite naturally, and there is no question of such things being considered either marvelous or extraordinary. You must remember that the devas who inhabit the fourth sphere of the astral world are also evolved beings, as different from the low type elementals and nature spirits as evolved men are different from the low types of coolies met with in the physical world. I'm not quite sure what coolies is, but remember, this was experienced in 1941 and written in the early 50s. The mental outlook of a deva is quite different from the mental outlook of a human being, of a human. The deva is mostly interested in the processes of nature. Their lives are so mixed up with the natural features, oceans, mountains, trees, flowers, rainfall, and the like, that they do not seem to be the slightest bit affected by the problems of life which interest mankind, except in special cases where their assistance is desired. Although the growth or decline of nations does not touch them, the progress of plant life, the scientific research work whereby nature provides man with his physical needs, interests them greatly. There is an evolved deva in charge of each different type of tree, shrub, or flower. Under these, quote, controllers work thousands of assistants, all of whom seem to have their special duties. Where too many trees are cut down by the inroads of so-called civilization, the Deva evolution endeavors to produce new trees to take the place of those destroyed. The experiments of modern science in such efforts as producing rain by artificial means are matters of great interest to the Deva kingdom, and in their own way they endeavor to influence man in his research activities along the right lines. Now I want to pause there for a moment. Again, this was experienced in 1941, written in the early 50s. I think it said 1953. And he's speaking here such efforts as producing rain by artificial means. And yet, until just recently, that has been denied on the planet. In 2024, they aren't denying it anymore. They're not telling the truth about it. But for a long, long time, they just called that conspiracy theory. Once more people figured it out that they were doing that. So I find that quite interesting. Back to the book here. The Deva kingdom expresses itself through color, and anyone who is interested in landscape gardening will see marvelous results achieved by the Devas in their activities on the third and fourth spheres of the astral world. In fact, in exactly the same way that a scientific gardener in the physical world endeavors to produce flowers of different colors by judicious grafting and pollination, the Deva experiments also, and as his knowledge is so much greater in that he is nearer to nature than his human counterpart, produces much more beautiful results. It is quite impossible to describe in words the beauty of the flowers produced by the Deva kingdom, for there are many hundreds of colors where we only have dozens. And we have no names for these minute variations of what we call reds, blues, and purples. The Devas also seem to express themselves in sound, with a view to influencing the activities of life. We often talk about, quote, producing the right atmosphere, end quote. And what we mean by that, usually, is getting people into a harmonious frame of mind. The Devas express themselves as an evolution in a much bigger way, and that which is called Deva music is the result of large numbers of Devas gathered together in woods and dells using weird wood instruments to produce the most beautiful sounds, always in perfect harmony. Their voices seem to be pitched much higher than human voices, but are much softer. They do not use words as we understand words. They sing mostly in huge choirs, but there are also soloists who from time to time sing by themselves, the main choir remaining silent whilst the passage is being rendered. I wonder if that's why I felt so blissful as a teenager when I would sing in the choir, either in church or in school. That's very interesting to me. The soloists usually perch themselves on high trees some distance from the main choir, and the result is absolutely amazing to our ears. It is quite impossible to give an adequate description of these, quote, concerts to anyone who has not heard them, but undoubtedly they produce an atmosphere which the Devas say affects the whole human race. It is probably their way of expressing peace and goodwill to all men, for they certainly could never understand the differences of opinion in the world that can lead to such things as modern wars. The Deva has no possessions as we understand possessions, nor does he need any. From his early days as a nature spirit, he does not have to earn money in order to support himself, and so perhaps he can be considered more fortunate than his human counterpart. Although these Devas do not seem to laugh or enjoy themselves in ways that we understand, they are only too willing to be friendly and helpful to man when called upon. In some ways, they do not seem to be interested in human affairs at all, yet in special cases, where earthquakes or volcanic eruptions have taken place, they seem to have their special work to do. For anything to do with nature, land, sea, flora, or fauna is their world. An earthquake or volcanic eruption is a natural phenomenon affecting part of the Earth's surface. When these tragedies take place, large numbers of devas are sent to help where they can. What exactly they do, I cannot tell you, but they certainly have their part to play in the scheme of things, and one day I expect we shall know more about their work than we do today. They also play their part in helping with human emotions. As I have said, bodily illness is quite unknown under astral conditions, but emotional upsets, where people become extremely depressed, occur. For in for the astral world is the world of emotion, and the astral body is our vehicle of emotional consciousness. In such cases, the devas seem to nurse depressed people back to emotional health. They soothe the people and bring them into touch with their divine music, the effect of which on one who is not very happy is very marked indeed. It is not often that one sees a really unhappy individual in the astral world, for the conditions there make it difficult to be unhappy. But there are cases where people are troubled, and the Deva people then act as doctors and nurses in a very effective way. I have given you sufficient to think about before I take you on your second astral journey. So I shall not visit you tomorrow, but shall come again in 3 days' time. I am leaving another tablet with you. Take it as before. When you go to bed tomorrow night, then you will certainly be asleep by 10 o'clock. I shall meet you at the moment that you go to sleep. Do not eat any meat or drink alcohol between now and then. And when you wake up in the morning, the day after tomorrow, write down immediately all that you remember. I shall help you to remember as I did before. Today, write up your notes of this talk. Tomorrow, study all your notes up to date. And tomorrow evening, we will journey together in our astral bodies. Expect me at 11 o'clock on the following day, when I hope you will have a full account of your experiences ready for me. I leave you now. What a morning! The weather was exceedingly warm and humid, and my Indian friend had talked for longer than he usually does, though what he said has been even more interesting than it has been on the days that have gone before. He is opening up a new vision of life in the world that follows this, which, if true, certainly makes the contacting of that world even more interesting than it was before. Not only am I excited about the prospect of another astral journey, but if this trip turns out to be equally thrilling to the one I had last week, then it will be wonderful indeed. I do not remember having seen Charles since that memorable night, and somehow I have not been in any way worried about this, for now I know that he is all right. The absence of his physical presence worries me no more. I am no longer sad. I feel that at any time I can contact him if the need is great. And also, there is the feeling which amounts to a certainty that he is not gone from us, that he is still very much in the land of the living. What this means to me is difficult to describe in mere words. But I am already beginning to want to talk to other people who are sad for the same reason that I was sad, to comfort them and explain something of this scheme which seems to rule the universe. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why I have been helped, for the urge to pass for the urge to pass on this information to others and have the capacity for giving them proof, such as my Indian friend is able to give me, is very strong within me. Possibly one day I shall be able to put my urge into effect. The next evening I went to the cinema, and as it was a thriller, it held my interest for a couple of hours. I went to bed immediately. I returned and tried the trick of imagining a mirror over my bed just before I settled myself for sleep. This time I did get a little result, for at the moment of losing consciousness, I remember finding myself standing in my bedroom, and there, sure enough, was my body lying peacefully on the bed. I remember distinctly starting to open my bedroom door. Even as I put my hand on the knob, I found that I was, as it were, half through the door, and immediately I remembered that doors are no obstacle to the astral body, so I wandered forth. I glided down the stairs a foot or so above the steps, and I recollect this because I lowered my head so as to miss the overhang at the point where the stairs turned the corner. Of course, bowing my head was quite unnecessary, but it was instinctive on my part. I went through the door and floated gently towards the harbor and sea. The next thing I remember was waking up this morning at the usual hour. I lay quite still, delving deeply into my inner consciousness, but nothing more than a few details that started off my night's rambling could I recall. Never mind, even that is something, and I am rather thrilled to find that without help I was able to retain continuity of consciousness at the moment of going to sleep and even remember the first stage of my astral journeyings. It is 9:30 p.m. I have finished my light dinner. I am now going to take the tablet and get into bed. What will I experience this time? And that's the end of chapter 6. We'll be right back with chapter 7. I hope you're enjoying this. If you have found this and you're just hearing this chapter, do go back and start at the first. There is a playlist that holds all the videos, and they should follow one right after the other. Until we meet again, my friends, be well.